Greetings from AGA Relationships. We discuss the issues that individuals deal with on a daily basis. First, let's look at video I-32. My parents' first kid was a boy. My parents own a company in the medical field. Since they were both working for the company, I was essentially raised without parents. I was always under the care of my nannies and rarely had private time with my parents. Since they were also in their best years, my parents did not want to shoulder the responsibility of raising a child. They frequently spent more than they made, leading an extravagant lifestyle. However, their lavish spending habits always landed them securely, since they each had sizable inheritances as a safety net. My parents had a daughter named Emma, 8 years after I was born. With Emma's birth, it became evident to me that my parents' neglect of me was caused by their lack of interest in spending time with me, rather than their hectic schedule. I've learned several explanations for why this has been the case throughout the years. I was an averagely intelligent youngster with a typical appearance. I prefer to be quiet and only speak when someone is speaking to me. In contrast, Emma was the reason my parents aspired to portray themselves as the ideal family. She was a gorgeous baby, with curling golden hair and blue eyes in their professional circles. She outperformed both of my parents, and even as a little child, her antics could draw in a small audience. Her inclusion made my family seem like the ideal family. Emma's particular care does not imply that my life was difficult. I had the good fortune to go to a pricey private school and then a prestigious university. However, the carelessness I experienced throughout my childhood taught me that hard effort is necessary to gain respect in life. I put in a ton of effort in school and college to land a good career. I put a lot of effort into my work so that I might advance as quickly as possible. Although I continued to communicate with my parents, the scar of my carelessness as a youngster never went away. Our parents never made Emma, the golden kid, put in a lot of effort. In addition to the fact that our parents indulged her, she was already an ordinary student. She did not pass her classes. After high school, she dropped out of school, and our parents hired her to work at the company. Even yet, she spent the most of her days on leave. She seldom stayed for more than a few hours. Even when she did show up, she despised being in the office and had problems with all of her coworkers and people. From friends and family back home, I learned of Emma's outbursts at work and the ensuing commotion. The way my parents concealed this from me, however, was what devastated me. After I found a job and was established I went to see my folks one day. I anticipated speaking with Emma on my parents' behalf. I believed that she would benefit professionally from a family-level intervention. When I visited, Emma wasn't there, and my parents made me feel foolish by telling me that Emma now runs half of their company. I sensed that my parents were quietly contrasting my accomplishments with Emma's. It dawned on me then. Emma was the kid that grew up under the supervision of my parents, whereas I was the one who grew up without their intervention. For them, it would have been unfortunate that I was outperforming Emma in my life. At the age of 19, I was already succeeding academically at my institution, but my sister, who is now the same age, was having fun. The years that followed saw little change. Emma was still subsisting on our parents, and, although I was unsure of the precise cause, I advanced in my job. During these years, Emma and I had a rocky relationship. I knew what she may be going through, because I'm the older brother. Her life was compared to mine by everyone, with the exception of our parents. She was always being asked to follow my footsteps and succeed, but she didn't want that. However, these comparisons compelled our parents to overcompensate by paying for her demands and giving her an unreasonable promotion inside their organization. I was concerned since my sister was growing up unable to hold herself accountable for anything. However, I had no place in her life to step in and give her advice. Since I was more noticeable than Emma during parties and family get-togethers, my parents had already pushed me out of their lives. Emma also liked it, so I created my own social circle at my residence. I met Danielle, my wife, 2 years ago. I never imagined that I would be associated with the fashion world, which is what Danielle did. I still find it hard to believe that a woman with such sophisticated fashion sense fell in love with me, since I had the worst sense of style ever. My appearance has improved since she entered my life, which has increased my self-confidence. Ironically, the gap my parents had left behind, which had existed since I was a little child, was filled. When Danielle entered my life, I was able to discover aspects of myself that I was unaware of. Therefore, it would not be an overstatement to claim that this woman is the greatest thing that has ever happened to me. Danielle and I made the decision to be married after a year of dating. We chose to have a lavish ceremony because neither of us had many close friends or family to invite to the wedding. After considerable investigation, deliberation, and discussion, we decided to have the destination wedding in Venice. We each purchased tickets for the guests we invited and accommodated them in the finest accommodations available. But I don't want to delve into the specifics of the ceremony. For the majority of those involved, the ceremony itself was new. I gladly accepted Emma's request to purchase tickets for her boyfriend as well. However, Danielle had urged me to change my mind. Emma's eyes were burning with jealousy the whole wedding, and our mother was continually comforting her. My parents were thrilled with the wedding I had organized, but they kept their joy to themselves. My family had shunned my attempts to have a family meal with Danielle even before to the wedding. I eventually quit the plan since they kept doing this after the wedding. At about the same time, I learned that my parents were disparaging me to everyone in their immediate vicinity, saying that I had deserted them in my old age despite using their money to finish my education and find employment. My father went so far as to say that he would not give me a single dime of his inheritance. My father's side aunt, who has always supported me, was gracious enough to alert me to the events that had been taking on at home. If I said it didn't hurt me, I would be lying. It's really difficult to lose family, and Danielle helped me get through that time. I learned that my sister was organizing her wedding a few months ago. According to my aunt, my sister was so impressed by my wedding that she desired a similar event for herself. She planned the extravagant wedding in Tuscany and forced her partner to pop the question. However, she begged our parents to pay for her wedding because she and her fiancé were penniless. They gladly granted her request, much to everyone's delight. However, they requested her to move the wedding to Hawaii because they couldn't afford to have it in Tuscany. My sister ultimately gave up after considerable reluctance, and she created a lavish wedding in Hawaii. My sister and dad didn't want me to be involved in any way throughout this preparation phase. During this time, I even had a meeting with them, but they said nothing regarding the wedding planning. I thus made the decision to face the fact that I would not receive an invitation to my sister's wedding. My parents surprised me by inviting Danielle and me to supper at their place a few weeks ago. My naive thinking assumed that since this was the first time they had invited Danielle to their home, it would be the first step toward repairing my connection with my parents. After the meal, my parents dropped the bomb, but the dinner went well. They said that they had experienced some significant financial losses and that a lawsuit against them was looming large over them like a Damocles sword. They were therefore unable to pay for my sister's wedding at that time. However, they were also unable to disappoint their daughter. In order to ask me to pay for her wedding, they asked me over. My parents were using me to appease that golden kid, but the meal was not a way to resolve our differences. On the inside, I was enraged, but I didn't even ask Danielle. I agreed to accept their offer, but with two restrictions. I wanted to give a speech on the wedding day and have complete influence over the wedding style. They were a little taken aback because I didn't typically deliver speeches, but they didn't mind because I was defending their favorite child's reputation. Emma's wedding was packed, in contrast to mine. Families from both of our parents' sides were invited, in addition to her acquaintances. I chose to give the speech since it was the ideal chance for me to express my true feelings. Today was the wedding day, and I could see Emma wasn't happy with the plans I had put together. I was there only to give my speech, but we had extremely different preferences, and I was certain that anything I choose would make her feel bad. I thus requested that Danielle videotape my remarks when the time arrived. First of all, ladies and gentlemen, I would want to express my gratitude to my parents for providing me with this platform. My parents exchanged bewildered glances. They had anticipated that I would mention Emma rather than them. My folks have been ignoring me for years, you see. They never helped me or offered me the same love and care that they showed my sister, so I went on. However, they come crawling back now that they need something from me. As my remarks took hold, the room fell into an awkward stillness. Emma was on the verge of tears, and my parents were ashamed. But I'm not resentful, I said with a smile. Actually, I'm appreciative. You see, I've been able to demonstrate to my parents my achievements and accomplishments through this wedding, and it feels really amazing, I must admit. I continued by speaking about the unfair treatment I received from my parents and how, despite all of my achievements, it still caused me pain. My parents sat silently, embarrassed, their faces flushed. I approached my sister and gave her a hug when I concluded my speech. "I'm very pleased for you. Sincerely," I said. "I hope your life with your spouse is amazing." With that, I left my sister and dad behind and left the reception with my wife. I returned to my hotel room by car and have been sitting here feeling content. My parents' reputation in our society is greatly influenced by the fact that they have always presented themselves as the ideal parents. I feel a little bad about using my sister's wedding as a platform, but I'm glad I now have a place to share with the community how I was treated. Am I the jerk for spoiling my sister's wedding by bringing up my parents' neglect of me when I was a little child? Update 1. Emma arrived at my room just before midnight and gave me a strong embrace. I wept with her because she was sobbing. Danielle left the room so that we could be alone. She explained to me that she had always thought I was not related to the family and had never heard my side of the tale. Since she was a little child, our parents had also made disparaging remarks about me, which left her with a bad impression of me. She was quite kind and even told me that our parents deserved it when I apologized for spoiling her wedding day. Since my sister's birth, I haven't had a more sincere talk with her than this one. Update. 1 week has gone by. My mother contacted me today to inform me that Emma had ceased communicating with my father, even though I had never seen either of them before leaving Hawaii. Although my father thought my speech was impolite and confrontational, it had a profound effect on her. He made the decision to sever all contact with me. However, Emma ceased communicating with him after learning about this. Since it was becoming difficult for her, my mother asked me to help in some way. Update 3. I did the unimaginable yesterday. I invited the entire family to supper so they could effectively work out their disagreements. I feel like I'm leading a family now, after feeling lost and orphaned for the previous 32 years. I discussed our issues over dinner, and even though my dad was adamant about owning up to his faults, I know he recognized that he was not a good parent to me. My mother expressed her regret for not being a better mother to me. I had no reason not to forgive her because I didn't end up badly. I had ensured that my sister's and my dad's problems were resolved before the conclusion of the evening. Being involved in family affairs feels unreal, but my main worry is whether or not this will continue. DSH, your family is nothing more than a group of wealthy jerks who have been accumulating wealth for generations and don't know what to do with it. When people are abandoning infants on the streets, what's wrong with being raised by nannies? As a youngster, you were loved and cared for. Because of this, you ended up doing well and earning a sizable sum of money, which enabled you to pay for 2 lavish weddings in quick succession. However, rather of being a doormat for so many years, you might have taken this action sooner. I hope your family will grow from their mistakes and learn how to love you in a healthy way. Rather of waiting until the last minute to blow up, you should learn to communicate more. The next tale. I'm a 29-year-old woman. My 31-year-old fiancé and I intend to tie the knot the following year. To put things in perspective, he has more money than I do, a better paying career, and no student loan burden. We were able to divide expenses well. I pay the bills since he owns our house. The title does not and will never include my name. I'm pleased that we came to this choice together. While no one marries with the goal of divorcing, we also have a decent system in place for cleaning and responsibilities. It is crucial to use caution. I gladly agreed when he asked if I would be prepared to sign a prenuptial agreement to safeguard his assets. Bitterness might cause needless drama and hassles in the event that a relationship fails, so why not? He prepared the paper and engaged a lawyer. I've read it. It's a reasonable issue for the dog to be legitimate. I must have my own attorney examine and approve it. The approximate cost is $1,500. I'm not quite broke, though. I also don't have a lot of extra cash. I informed him that I didn't believe it was reasonable for me to spend $1,500 on a paper that was primarily for his benefit. In essence, I will sign it without a doubt, but if he wants my lawyer to handle it, I expect him to cover the cost. He is furious with me and accuses me of breaking my promise and coming up with reasons not to sign a prenuptial agreement. That isn't true. If it was legal, I would sign it now without a lawyer. I apologize for not wanting to pay out of pocket for a document he needs, but we are at an embarrassing standstill. I'm not insulted by it, but I don't want it. Furthermore, I absolutely do not want to spend a lot of money on it. The cost of marriage is high enough. To add, I divide the energy and internet expenses with him and pay the grocery bills. He covers everything like upkeep, taxes, and fees. For now, the final edit. I appreciate all of your remarks. I'm reading all of them. I have a lot on my mind. I earned all I own and was raised in a highly independent household. I guess I'm afraid I'll come across as a money-grubbing person. By the way, he's not wealthy. Consider his salary to be upper middle class and mine to be lower middle class. That I could be heading in the wrong path too far. He's a jerk for accusing you of having hidden agendas, NTA. Regretfully, the unfortunate status of the prenuptial litigation affects both of you. For it to be legitimate, your own attorney must be hired and paid for. If he reimburses the attorney, a disagreement exists. Tell him that you are spending a lot of money on something that solely protects him, not the prenuptial agreement. You are able to pay your own lawyer. After he receives his prenuptial agreement, he must reimburse you by covering your expenses for a few months or so. Since you would be paying your lawyer directly, they won't even need to be aware of your side of the story. You've hit it off with your fiancé. A conflict of interest does not exist. If he desires NTA, he must cover all associated expenses. It's simple. I would worry a little. It appears that you could be overlooking certain warning signs. It's his house, all right. However, you explicitly said that you had decided your name would never appear on the title. All he's paying for is a mortgage for an asset that only he will ever own, while you're squandering your money and paying all the costs each month. You even referred to it as our house. However, it doesn't seem like it will ever be. I would give that choice a lot of thought again, and consider an even longer and harsher NTA if he declines to pay for the prenuptial agreement he desires. However, I would strongly advise you to locate a family law specialist in your nation. Even if he is adamant about not making payments and you are adamant about getting married, make a payment plan for a little debt. Think of this as an investment and a location to obtain accurate, unbiased counsel about the prenuptial agreement's wording and what is reasonable for your own safety, as well as any future offspring. You should give this paper the same priority as he does. Watch this space for other tales from our connections with girls. Story 2. The title of this story is, I Purchased My Wife's Family Home. She then took the side of her conceited mother. They had nothing left after I ejected them both from existence. Hello everyone. Prior to the start of today's video, I need your assistance. One of the greatest ways you can help us out is to subscribe, since we've observed the channel is losing some of its popularity. It's simple, free, and helps us continue to provide you with amazing content. Your assistance is much appreciated. Together, let's continue to build this channel. Many thanks. Let's begin the video now. Reddit, hello. Allow me to introduce myself. I'm 36-year-old Ethan, a Dallas, Texas-based self-made millionaire. Not everything in my life has been easy. I worked hard, made sacrifices, and spent more late hours than I can remember to earn every dime I own. I started my real estate business from the ground up. I began by purchasing a single duplex with a modest debt and a lofty goal. I proved to myself and everyone else that I didn't require favors or shortcuts to succeed by growing that small investment into a successful company over the years. I thus believed I had finally found someone who understood me when I met Lisa, a 33-year-old woman, someone who didn't care about my wealth or prestige. She struck me as nice, sincere, and grounded. Carol, complete opposite of her mother. Lisa would make fun of her mother's overbearing behavior, and I would simply nod in agreement, assuming it was overblown. How horrible could one person be after all? It goes horribly wrong. A single stare from Carol was enough to bring down even the toughest person. If you didn't agree with her, you would as well have committed a criminal because of her amazing ability to control every discourse. She had more than simply opinions. She had orders. Lisa had no say in anything as a child. Carol made decisions about her friends, her clothes, and even the college she would attend. It wasn't advice. A dictatorship prevailed. Lisa first appeared to have escaped her mother's hold. Although she was self-reliant, humorous, and had her own goals, it was quickly apparent that Carol still had a leash on her, although one that was less noticeable. Every significant choice Lisa made had an implicit requirement for Carol's consent. I was very mad about it, but I didn't say anything because, well, I liked Lisa. However, the power struggle with Carol truly started after we became engaged. She did more than simply provide wedding-related recommendations. She attempted to manage everything, from the guest list to the floral arrangements. She desired for everything to have her fingerprints. The last straw. Because our venue didn't have the charm she had in mind, she attempted to veto it. I had to make a decision. "We are getting married, not you," I informed her in a forceful but courteous tone. She pretended that her firstborn kid had just been taken from her. She falsely accused me of destroying the family, and the waterworks began. Lisa pleaded with me to make a concession, of course. She said, "It's only one day. Is it not possible for her to feel included?" All right, I gave in, but not completely. I stood my own on the important things, but I let Carol choose some of the little aspects, including the dessert menu and table decorations. The wedding was stunning. Despite Carol's interference, it was evident in hindsight that the day wasn't about us. It was to demonstrate that she was still in control. I had to make another difficult decision before to the wedding. "Please sign a prenuptial agreement, Lisa." I had worked too hard to risk losing everything if things ever went wrong, but it wasn't exactly a romantic gesture. I was surprised at how little resistance Lisa put up. "I understand," she responded. "You want to safeguard the wonderful thing you've created." Her composed response, in my opinion at the time, was an indication of maturity. I would come to understand later that it was likely simply another instance of how Lisa had been conditioned to comply with the wishes of others by Carol's influence. Things were going well for a while. Life as a married couple was wonderful. Lisa was caring, encouraging, and all I could have wanted in a spouse. Every week we tried different restaurants, went on trips, and even began discussing the possibility of purchasing a vacation house. Together, we seemed to be creating something strong, but Carol was always there, ready to agitate things again, like a storm forming in the distance. I had no idea that the drama with Carol was only beginning. She wanted more than merely to be in our lives. She desired to be the focal point. If I thought it was difficult to confront her throughout the wedding planning, I had no idea what was about to happen. Carol wasn't only intrusive, she was cunning, strategic, and just unrelenting, and she had no intention of letting me or anybody else prevent her from achieving her goals. Carol and her husband Frank made the decision to sell their Austin home around 6 months ago. It was, how should I phrase this politely? A shithole? A rickety old money hole. It had once had potential but had been neglected for decades. The kitchen appeared to have not been renovated since the 1980s, the plumbing moaned and the roof leaked. There was also Carol's trademark flowered wallpaper all over the place. The house was actually a horror. Lisa was the first to answer the phone. Carol presented the notion as though it were a once-in-a-lifetime amazing chance. "Both of you ought to purchase it. Keep it in the family," she said. I laughed uncontrollably when Lisa brought it up to me. "Do you wish for us to purchase that home? The one that's crumbling?" Lisa tried to convince me of the concept by saying, "It's not that bad. It only requires some care." I could see the direction of this. Lisa was watering the seed that Carol had sown. I wasn't biting, though. "That house needs more than a little TLC, darling. An exorcism is required, and a bulldozer, most likely." But Lisa didn't slow down. She continued giving us reasons to purchase it. "I grew up there," she added. "Since it's family, we would receive a tremendous deal. Carol even suggested that it would be a wise investment for us to convert it into a rental home." The lady persisted. At last, I said to Lisa, "Let's do the math." I wasn't going to base my choice on guilt trips or nostalgia. In order to estimate the repairs, I met with a buddy who is a contractor. The decision? The cost to bring the house up to code was at least $150,000. In addition to Carol's $450,000 asking price, we would be spending $600,000 for a home that is most likely worth just half that amount. I demonstrated the arithmetic to Lisa. It's not a big deal. This is financial suicide, I remarked. Carol wasn't finished, though. She became quite emotional and went all out. She informed Lisa that although she had always hoped to keep the house in the family, she would be devastated if it were sold to a stranger. For good measure, she even included some crocodile tears. Lisa, just being the kind person she is, gave in to the strain. I grudgingly consented since I didn't want to argue with my wife. All right. As long as I can afford everything my wife wants, we'll purchase it, I said. Why not? A huge error. Enormous. After the transaction was completed, we were formally recognized as the happy owners of the house that had belonged to Carol and Frank, or the money pit, as I like to refer to it. Naturally, Carol was quick to give herself a pat on the back. She smiled as if she had found a solution to world hunger and remarked, "You're doing the right thing." There are a lot of memories in this house. Yes, recollections of poor choices and expensive fixes. The issue arose very instantly. We started by finding mold in the basement. There was a new problem every time I looked back. Carol, meantime, was living it up in her new, smaller home, totally unaware of it, or simply unconcerned about the mayhem she had left behind. Carol wanted us to do more than simply purchase the house. Oh no. She wished for us to keep it safe. She had come by at random to give us unsolicited advice on what repairs to prioritize or how to decorate. The old cabinets cannot be torn out, she added. They are the house's originals, the original woman. They were decaying. I quickly realized that this had nothing to do with the home. It has to do with control. Carol wasn't only trying to vent her troubles on us. She desired to be active. She was determined to keep pulling on the home, which was her leash. Carol unexpectedly stopped over one day with a bunch of picture albums. She wanted to show us how the mansion looked in its heyday so we could plan the improvements. I didn't believe it. I tried to make things polite by saying, "We've got it under control, Carol," but she wouldn't have it. She said in a dramatic voice, "This isn't just any house. This is the heritage of our family. Legacy?" Only a headache was being passed down from that house. When Carol proposed that we temporarily move in with her and Frank while we remodeled, things truly went south. "We can all be closer as a family and you'll save money," she remarked. My coffee almost suffocated me. "More intimate as a family," I said. "We recently purchased your home, Carol. Isn't that enough close?" To her credit, Lisa also didn't appear very excited about the prospect. Carol, however, had a knack for wearing people down. To get her to stop, she would persist in probing until you eventually gave in. Frank began acting strangely at this point. He would give me a call to inquire on the status of the renovations or whether we needed assistance. I initially assumed he was only being pleasant, but there was a strange tone in his voice. He seemed to be searching for information. I dismissed it, assuming he was only attempting to maintain his involvement. I didn't realize that Frank had a secret since Carol was so engaged in the house, one that would expose the entire situation. I can't believe I let things to get this far in retrospect. However, it is simple to become entangled in the web of someone as entitled as Carol. She played Lisa like a violin and knew just what buttons to press. I wanted to think that purchasing the house was only a setback and that we could work things out. But I knew better in my heart. Not only was the home a poor investment, a Trojan horse was involved. Carol's ambitious plan to take over our life when we moved into the house was also contained inside. I believed that the worst of the drama was over. Although the place was a complete mess, I believed that we could make it habitable with time, money, and effort. Carol's death grasp on the land and us was something I didn't anticipate. Like most nightmare situations, it began modestly. The couch, which I clearly remembered being against the far wall that morning, was now angled awkwardly toward the fireplace when I returned home from a long day at work one afternoon. Additionally, other throw pillows that I didn't recognize had materialized out of thin air. "Have you moved the furniture?" I questioned Lisa. Confused, she raised her head from her phone. "What?" Both of us dismissed it. Perhaps Lisa had simply forgotten to move it. Or perhaps I was going crazy. It wasn't important enough to worry about. Then it occurred once more. And once more. They moved the coffee table to a strange location. Little items would vanish and kitchen chairs would be switched around, similar to my preferred travel mug. Nor was it merely furniture. I vowed fervently that I had never touched the bathroom sink when it was left running at full blast. Really, Lisa? Following the third or fourth incident, I said, "Are you certain you're not trying to trick me? Because it's not funny if you are." She rolled her eyes. "Ethan, I have better things to do than play musical chairs with the furniture." At this point, I was starting to get paranoid. Something felt off, but I couldn't put my finger on it. It wasn't until one particularly hot afternoon that the truth finally hit me in the face. Literally, I walked into the house and was immediately greeted by the overpowering scent of Carol's perfume. That sickly floral stench. She practically bathed in it was unmistakable. "Lisa," I said, trying to keep my cool. "Did your mom stop by today?" She frowned, clearly annoyed by my question. "No. Why would she?" I didn't push it, but my gut told me otherwise. Carol was here. I just didn't know how or when, but I was determined to find out. The next weekend, while Lisa was out running errands, I installed security cameras around the house. I didn't tell her. I knew she'd call me paranoid and blow it off, but I needed proof. Something concrete to confirm I wasn't imagining things. Sure enough, the cameras paid off. For the very next week, I got a notification on my phone while I was at work. There she was, clear as day Carol in all her nosy glory, letting herself in with a key. She waltzed around like she owned the place, snooping through drawers, moving stuff around, and even tossing out a couple of my things that apparently didn't meet her standards. She didn't just visit. She acted like the house was still hers. I was furious when I got home that night. I confronted Lisa with the footage. "Look at this," I said, shoving my phone in her face. "Your mom has been breaking into our house. She's throwing my stuff out. This is insane." Lisa watched the video, her face a mix of shock and discomfort. But instead of siding with me, she said, "She's not breaking in. She's just visiting. She probably misses the house." Misses the house. I exploded, "Lisa. She's snooping through our drawers and tossing my things like it's a yard sale. This isn't normal." Lisa defended her mom as you. "She's not doing any harm. She's just having a hard time letting go." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Carol had crossed every boundary imaginable, and Lisa was acting like I was the crazy one for being upset. But I wasn't about to let it slide. I told Lisa point blank, "If she steps foot in this house again without our permission, I'm calling the cops." Of course, Lisa ran straight to Carol with this, and you can imagine how that went. Carol called me the next day, sobbing hysterically. She accused me of being disrespectful and heartless, claiming I was ruining her memories. Apparently, changing the locks was akin to stabbing her in the back. I didn't care. I wasn't about to let her keep treating our home like her personal playground. That's when Carol went nuclear. She started spreading rumors to family members, saying I was trying to cut her out of Lisa's life and destroying her legacy. She even called Lisa multiple times a day, crying about how she felt betrayed. And of course, Lisa fell for it again. Maybe we could give her a key. Lisa proposed one night like it was the most normal thing in the world. "Just for emergencies." "Absolutely not," I responded, my patience hanging by a thread. "She's already demonstrated she can't respect limits. This is our house now, Lisa, not hers." One night, Carol came up at the house, knocking on the door and asking to be allowed in. I declined. She yelled at me through the door, calling me every name in the book. I stood my position, although the whole neighborhood certainly heard the uproar. Later, Lisa attempted to play mediator. "She's simply sad," she said. "Doesn't she have the right to storm in and have a tantrum because you know how emotional she gets?" I fired back. "I'll establish boundaries with her if you won't." The house began to feel less like a home and more like a battlefield. I couldn't stop watching over my shoulder, wondering what Carol would do next. She wasn't only touching us. She was pushing herself to the limit to see how far she could go before I lost it. And I was near, I tell you. Very near. I was at my wit's end by the time Frank called to speak. Between Carol's frequent unannounced visits, her outbursts, and Lisa's unrelenting support for her, I honestly didn't have high expectations when Frank proposed that we meet for coffee. Normally, Frank was silent. The type of person who kept his head down and nodded in agreement with Carol's tirades. I wasn't ready for what he told me, but I assumed he could be trying to make things more amicable. We got together at a little eatery close to my workplace. When I entered, Frank was already seated in a booth. He was drinking a black coffee and was more anxious than I had ever seen him. The man wasn't very healthy, but on that particular day, he appeared extremely gaunt. I could tell he wasn't there to make small talk when he gestured for me to sit down. Ethan. He began to lean in as if we were about to talk about secret information. Now you have to know anything about Carol. Even though I wasn't a huge fan of Carol, it was unnerving to hear Frank say it out. Seemingly concerned that someone may overhear, he looked around the diner. Then revealed a secret. He said that Carol had been organizing this for months. She had a plan to sell you the house. I gazed at him, attempting to comprehend his words. What's the plan? I inquired. What are you discussing? Frank scratched his temples and moaned as if this were physically agonizing. She intended you to purchase the house, get overburdened with renovations, and then resell it to us. She would then insist that you and Lisa move in with us. I blinked, astonished. Hold on, what? How could she possibly want that? She desires authority. Frank looked embarrassed as he acknowledged. Control has always been her goal, above Lisa, above everything. I remained silent for a minute. I simply sat there and let the words to fully register. Carol had always been intrusive with her pranks. However, this manipulation was on a whole other level. She wasn't only interfering, she was plotting, committing a lengthy scam to get a permanent place in our life. Frank may have misunderstood my silence because he immediately continued. Ethan, I didn't agree with it. You know how she is? Even though I told her it was a poor idea. She doesn't pay attention to others. I laughed resentfully. Yes, I'm not joking. Frank then traversed the table with an envelope. There was a $20,000 check inside. This is all I could come up with, even though I know you spent a lot more money remodeling the house. This is how I'm going to make it right, he said. If you agree to sell the house back to me, I'll give you the remaining funds you used to buy it. I glanced at the check, my thoughts racing without Carol noticing. I wanted to tear it up right then and there. The money wasn't the point here. The principle was at issue. Carol had manipulated Lisa into persuading me to purchase her childhood house by using her affection for it as a weapon. Frank was now attempting to purchase my quiet. I pushed the envelope back toward him and said, I don't want your money. All I want is for your wife to avoid me at all costs. With a disappointed expression, Frank sighed once again. Ethan, I can't control her. I've tried, I promise. I was more angry than I had been in a long time when I left the diner. All I had suspected was verified by Frank's confession. Carol wanted more than just the house. She desired to control us and have complete control over our lives. Lisa, too. She was blind to it. She didn't want to, or worse. I sat Lisa down that evening and told her everything. I explained everything. The actual repair costs, and Frank's admission of Carol's devious scheme. In the hopes that it would finally open her eyes, I even told her about the $20,000 bribe. However, Lisa turned everything on me rather than being shocked or upset with her mother. Demonizing her is your obsession, she said. She shook her voice. Despite her flaws, she is my mother. Why are you unable to let it go? Give it up. I yelled at Lisa. She tricked us into purchasing this home so she could repurchase it at a lower cost. She is attempting to take charge of our life. You're simply allowing her to do so. She's only attempting to assist. Lisa responded with a yell. You're constantly assuming the worst. It dawned on me then that Lisa would not change. No amount of reason or proof could loosen Carol's hold on her. It was too strong. It was a lost struggle for me. After then, things rapidly got out of hand. Carol's shenanigans must have increased when she realized I was onto her. One evening, she arrived at the house with a contractor she had, of course, hired without telling us. She said that by obtaining repair quotes, she was assisting. She created such a commotion when I told her to go that the neighbors came out to see. However, Carol calling the cops on me was the last straw. Yes, you read correctly. She said that by altering the house, I was ruining her property. I gave the police the deed bearing my name when they arrived. Lisa didn't think it was humorous, but they laughed and went. She glared at me and said, "You're just making things worse. How come you can't attempt to be friendly with her?" "Because she's crazy," I yelled. "And you're allowing her to destroy our union." That was the tipping moment. I informed Lisa that she had to decide between her mother and myself. I couldn't continue to live this way, but I didn't want to give an ultimatum. Her response: quiet. She didn't say anything. She simply looked at me with tears in her eyes. I threw her out of the house at the end of the night because she had chosen me, entitled mother above me. That evening when I left the home, I had a strange mixture of relief and rage. Relief that I had now realized what I had to do, and rage at Lisa for once again supporting her mother. I had been attempting to use reason with folks who didn't want it for months. They want authority. Carol desired authority over my life, my home, and even our relationship. Lisa, too. She refused or was unable to see it. That night, I would have rather stayed in a hotel. It provided me with the much-needed space. This evening, I relived every disagreement, every red flag I'd disregarded, and every instance in which I'd allowed Carol and Lisa to drive me over the line. The more I considered it, the more obvious it seemed. I wasn't only battling Carol, I was battling Lisa's unwillingness to defend our union. I gave my lawyer a call early the following day to begin the separation procedure. I must defend myself. He didn't need much persuasion, I told him. The guy knew when a client was in over their head since he had dealt with enough ugly divorces. He brought up the prenuptial agreement, reassured me that it would make things easier and provide a small bright spot amid the storm. But I wasn't going to abandon everything without a strategy. For starters, the house was in disarray, but it was still mine. To get rid of the continual memories of Carol's interference, I made the decision to rent it out. I was able to locate a pleasant young couple who were excited to move in thanks to my real estate contacts, pipes that creak and everything. Naturally, though, things are never easy with Carol. The new occupants didn't even move in for a week. They called me frantically. Carol had apparently arrived at the residence, rapped on the door, and demanded entry when they wouldn't allow her in. She yelled something about her home and family rights as she attempted to barge in. "What is she?" Stunned, I inquired. She attempted to shove by us, saying we didn't belong there. We had to contact the police, the tenant stated. The final straw was that I was ready to face Carol head-on, so I drove directly to the home. However, she had left by the time I got there. Fortunately, the renters were uninjured, despite being disturbed. I told them that Carol wouldn't bother them again, and apologized sincerely. I then gave her a call. "What the devil is wrong with you, Carol?" As soon as she picked up, I made my demand. "Pardon me," she began in a tone that was brimming with false innocence. "You understand exactly what I mean. You arrived to my home. You tried to break into my residence. Have you gone insane? My family lives there. She lost her temper. I'm perfectly entitled to be there." "No, you don't," I fired back. "I bought it from you. I now own it. I'll file charges if you don't leave my land." Carol gasped dramatically, as if I had just offended her entire family. I hung up before she could answer, saying, "You wouldn't dare try me." That should be the end of it, I thought. Naturally, though, Carol had to exacerbate the situation. I received a notification a few days later. I was being sued by her. She said that by renting out the house, I had broken the terms of the transaction. Ignore the fact that the contract had no such clauses. This was just spite. Carol intended to ruin my life as much as she could. My lawyer told me that the notice was without merit once I emailed it to him. "She has no leg to stand on," he remarked. "She is only attempting to scare you." Lisa, however, continued to live with Carol. It wasn't exactly sunshine and rainbows, based on what I've heard. According to friends who stayed in touch with her, she appeared to be unhappy. Evidently, living together made Carol's domineering personality even worse. In order to assist at home, Lisa had resigned her work, which essentially meant running errands for Carol and spending the entire day listening to her gripes. I initially felt sorry for Lisa, but then I recalled all the occasions she had favored her mother over me, all the justifications she had offered, and all the evenings I had pondered whether I was the one with the derangement. Pity became confirmation. She had already decided. She was now dealing with the fallout. Fortunately, the case was unsuccessful. Carol's bullshit was instantly exposed by the judge when my counsel filed a move to dismiss. This is obviously a pointless case, the judge stated, hardly masking his annoyance. As the decision was made, Carol's arrogant face turned to one of sheer shame. To make matters worse, she was compelled to pay my legal bills. The greatest thing, though, the renters remained. Despite its peculiarities, they cherished the house and had no plans to leave. They phoned the police whenever Carol attempted to interfere, and they were more than pleased to inform her that she was not the rightful owner of the land. Carol herself eventually had to give up, but Lisa wasn't finished. She phoned me about a month after the litigation disaster. She spoke in a faltering, almost frantic tone. "Can we discuss, Ethan?" Despite my hesitation, I decided to get coffee with her. She had a different appearance when I saw her, weary, defeated, as if her soul had finally been destroyed by the burden of living with Carol. "I messed up," she said. Tears were streaming from her eyes. "I ought to have defended you. It was the apology I had been waiting for us. However, it didn't feel as fulfilling as I had hoped. Perhaps because it was already too late. I wasn't going to go back into the lion's den now that the harm had been done." I apologized, maintaining my tone. "However, I am no longer able to do this. I must go on." Lisa gave a nod. She was crying uncontrollably. "I get it." It was over in an instant. She didn't receive $1 from me thanks to the prenup, nor my money nor the house, nothing. Carol's ambitious scheme had failed miserably. Rather of exerting control over me, she found herself stranded with Lisa. Story 3. The headline of the tale is, "My fiancé made fun of my career at her office party." In front of everyone, I called it quits on the engagement. Hello everyone. Prior to starting today's video, I need your assistance. One of the greatest ways you can help us out is to subscribe, since we've observed the channel is losing some of its popularity. It's simple, free, and helps us continue to provide you with amazing content. Your assistance is much appreciated. Together, let's continue to build this channel. Many thanks. Let's begin the video now. Hello Reddit. I finally decided to share this after sitting on it for a while, trying to figure out what happened. I am an electrician by trade. I will not sugarcoat the situation. I adore my work. Of all, it's hardly the sort of thing that people boast about at elegant dinner parties or include in movies. However, I've been doing manual labor since I was a youngster, and I'm skilled at it. Nor did I just happen to stumble across this. I put forth a lot of effort to get here. I worked long hours as an apprentice to get experience, attended trade school for years, and took on side jobs to pay for my equipment. In a sector where one's reputation can make or ruin one's career, I had to prove myself at every turn. It's really exciting to fix something damaged and watch it function again, and I've spent many hours learning circuits, panels, and wiring. In addition, I've made a respectable living from it. I manage my own little business, doing everything from creative lighting installations for companies to house maintenance. Reaching the point where I could manage my own business wasn't simple, but it was worthwhile. In addition to having devoted customers and a nice truck, I'm currently saving money for my first home. Although it's not particularly ostentatious, I wouldn't trade it for anything because it's honest work. Though I'll admit that I've had to deal with people who despise what I do, I've always been proud of where I am. You are aware of the kind. I believed that my fiancée, Lisa, a 30-year-old woman, wasn't one of those people who believe that true success entails working in a cubicle or holding a long title like senior executive. I've been dating Lisa for roughly 4 years. She works in corporate marketing, a field I've always tried to respect but don't really understand. I felt like a normal guy standing next to a magazine cover because of her ambition, drive, and polish. She is the type of person who organizes everything, including our 5-year goals and weekend brunches. That was something I liked about her. I believed that we were mutually balanced. She is the polished go-getter, and I am the hands-on problem solver. Initially, Lisa would express her admiration for my work ethic. She would say things like, "You're so good with your hands," or "I love how passionate you are about what you do." It's amazing. I accepted that since it was nice to have someone support me, especially someone like Lisa who made the effort to find me, even though she could have chosen any kind of suit and tie. She once told me, because you're a real man," in response to my question about why she was so interested in me. But now that I'm looking back, I think there were signs that she didn't really respect me or what I do. It's just that I ignored them. For example, there was this one time when we were talking about future goals, and I said I wanted to expand my business, maybe hire a couple of guys to work under me, so I wasn't always on the job myself. Her response? "That's cute, babe. You'd be like a little boss." I laughed it off at the time, but now it feels like one of those comments that wasn't as innocent as it seemed. Then there was the way she talked about her own career. She'd go on and on about how hard it was to get where she is, how she had to prove herself in a male-dominated industry, and how she's always working twice as hard as everyone else. Don't get me wrong, I respected the hell out of her hustle. But looking back, I realized she never really asked about my work in the same way. Like, she never cared about the struggles I had running my own business, or the times I had to work 12-hour days in someone's attic during a heat wave just to make ends meet. Still, I never thought it was a big deal. I figured we just had different ways of showing support. She was all about big, flashy gestures, posting pictures of us with captions like "so proud of my guy," while I was more low-key. I'd show up to her work events, listen to her vent about her boss, and make sure she had dinner waiting when she got home late. To me, that was enough. Things started to feel off earlier this year, though. Lisa got a promotion, and suddenly her life became all about networking and corporate events. She started talking about her colleagues constantly. This guy who's a rising star in the industry. That woman who's such a powerhouse. I noticed she didn't mention me as much anymore when I asked about it. She brushed it off, saying, "You're not part of that world, babe. It's not a big deal." That stung a little, but I let it go. I figured she was just caught up in the excitement of her new role. Then came the co-workers' holiday party. Lisa had been talking about it for weeks. She kept saying it was a big deal and that it was important. "I come with her. You'll love it," she said. "You'll get to see the people I work with and the world I live in." I wasn't exactly thrilled about spending a night with a bunch of corporate types, but I figured it was important to her, and I wanted to be by her side. So I agreed. As the date got closer, I started to feel more and more out of my element. Lisa was planning everything down to the last detail. What we'd wear, what time we'd arrive, even what kind of conversations I should prepare for. "Just talk about your business," she said. People love hearing about small businesses that should have been my first red flag. Why would I need to prepare to talk about what I do? But again, I brushed it off. I wanted to be there for her, even if it meant stepping into a world that felt completely foreign to me. The night of the party, I put on my one good suit and did my best to clean up. Lisa looked incredible, like she always does, in this sleek black dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent. When we got to the venue, I realized just how out of place I was. The place was decked out with fancy decorations. Everyone was dressed to the nines, moving through the room like they were on a runway. I was trying my best to play along, even though this whole thing feels like stepping onto a set of The Office. But way less funny and way more fake. People are walking around in their overpriced suits and shoes talking about brand initiatives and quarterly projections. Meanwhile, I'm just trying to keep my tie from choking me to death. Lisa's in her element, though. She's laughing, working the room and introducing me to everyone like she's the star of the show. Honestly, I was kind of proud of her at first. I mean, she's good at what she does, and it's obvious her colleagues respect her. But the more she introduced me to people, the more it started to feel off. It started small. Every time she'd introduce me, she'd throw in some little comment that felt like a jab. Like, "This is my fiancé. He's an electrician. He keeps things running around the house. Or if you ever need someone to fix your outlets, he's your guy." She'd laugh, and so would they. But I wasn't laughing. I brushed it off the first couple of times, telling myself she was just nervous or trying to be funny. But after the fifth or sixth time, I started to wonder if this was just how she talked about me behind my back. Anyway, Lisa and I were standing with a group of her colleagues when one guy, a real smug-looking dude in a tailored suit that probably cost more than my truck, asked me what I do for a living. I smiled and told him, "I'm an electrician. I run my own business, simple and plain." Before he could say anything, Lisa jumped in. "Oh, he's amazing with his hands," she said with this overly sweet tone that immediately made me cringe. He's like my little handyman at home. Anytime something breaks, he's on it. Isn't that adorable? Adorable. That word hit hard. The way she said, it wasn't affectionate. It was condescending. Like I was some kind of pet she brought to show off. The group burst out laughing, and I just stood there trying to keep my face neutral. Inside, I was fuming. I wanted to say something, but I didn't want to make a scene, so I just smiled awkwardly and nodded like I was in on the joke. But I wasn't. I was done. The rest of the night didn't get better. Every time we talked to someone new, Lisa found a new way to put me down. Whether it was calling me, her fix-it guy, or joking about how I probably didn't get their world of corporate marketing. At one point, I heard her telling someone, "Oh yes, he's my little wires and pliers person, like Bob the Builder, but less ambitious." I was standing there thinking, did she just reduce my job to a joke? I let it slip, attempting to maintain the peace. But it didn't end there. What really ticked me off was how nonchalant she was about it, like she didn't even notice she was insulting me. Or worst, she noticed, and just didn't care. The way she looked at me when she made those statements, it wasn't love or pride. It was a pity, like I was some small-town man who got lucky to be with her and should just be grateful for the worst part. Everyone else appeared to gobble it up. They were laughing along with her, like her comments were the greatest thing they'd ever heard. And why wouldn't they? In their view, I was just the blue-collar man following along with the corporate queen. They didn't know me or what I'd constructed for myself. All they saw was what Lisa was presenting them. Someone to laugh at. By the time the toast came, I was already tuned out. Lisa got up in front of everyone, looking like she controlled the room, and started praising her crew for their hard work. I was partially listening, just trying to get through the night without losing it. When she suddenly said, "And I want to give a special shout-out to my fiancé," I looked up thinking, maybe she's going to redeem herself, but nothing. "He's not really a corporate person," she remarked, beaming like she was going to unleash the best joke of the night. "But if anyone's dishwasher stops working, he's your guy." Laughter broke out throughout the room. As 100 pairs of eyes turned to me, I sat still. I had a burning sensation on my face. I turned to face Lisa in the hopes that she would see how embarrassed I was, but she was too preoccupied to notice. She was grinning, as if she had just won a prize for the most amusing toast. It was more than I could handle. Excusing myself, I went outdoors to breathe. My chest felt constricted, and my hands were trembling. I kept repeating her words in my mind, each one becoming more powerful than the last. "Not a businessman. For power outages, are you your man?" What on earth had just occurred? There was no toast there. The takedown was that. I'm standing outside this absurdly opulent location, attempting to cool off by inhaling the chilly air. I can still hear the laughter that filled the room as Lisa's toast was served. I'm not sure if I'm more upset or ashamed, or perhaps a combination of the two. I kept asking myself, has she always seen me like this? As convenient as those handymen she hired? Lisa emerges from the house a few minutes later. Her face is displaying a large, oblivious smile. "You're there." As if I were a lost child, she says. "You slip out? But why?" I try not to become angry as I stare at her, but I can already feel it building. "Can you imagine how embarrassing that was?" She blinks, obviously taken by surprise. "What are you discussing?" "The toast," I reply, raising my voice slightly. "In front of your whole office, you essentially make fun of me." Lisa rolls her eyes as if I'm the one who's acting irrationally. "Come on, please. It was only a joke. Everyone found it amusing. Yes, as they are unfamiliar with me." I lost my temper. "They just know what you said to them, that their dishwashers can be fixed by me, a non-corporate man. How insulting is it? Do you even recognize it?" She lets out a sigh as if speaking to a young kid. "You're going overboard." The depth wasn't that great. All I wanted to do was lighten the atmosphere, reduce the tension. I took a big breath and attempted to explain, even though I could feel my hand clenching at my sides. "I've put forth a ton of effort to get here, Lisa. I own my own company. I earn a respectable living. All of that was condensed into a punchline by you. What do you suppose my feelings are about that?" Rather than offering an apology or even making an effort to comprehend. Lisa gave me an irritated face while crossing her arms. "I'm not sure why you're taking this so personally. I didn't say anything false, really. You work as an electrician. The work isn't very glamorous, There it is, the reality. It's simple. Stunned, I look at her. Wow, I said. So that's your true opinion of me. As if I were a mere toolbox-wielding person fortunate enough to be with you. That's not what I said. You're forcing me to say things. I'm only trying to tell you that you need to learn to accept humor. It's not about me here. It's about your lack of confidence. She began to shout. My lack of confidence. My blood began to boil. Right now. It has nothing to do with my insecurity. It's because you don't value me or my work. Are you even aware of how patronizing you came across tonight? You always sound so condescending. Lisa's expression grew tough. What do you know? Perhaps I do believe you're exaggerating. Perhaps you ought to think about the reasons behind your defensiveness regarding your work. You wouldn't be bothered by a little teasing if you had self-confidence. I realized then that this was more than just a disagreement. This is an underlying issue. This is Lisa. I was not respected by her. She hasn't, either. I try to steady my voice by taking a deep breath. Lisa, you know what? I am no longer able to do this. She squinted. What are you going to do? I said, gesturing between us. This connection. I'm finished. Lisa looked at me as if I had suddenly developed a second head. Then she lets out a little, incredulous laugh. Are you serious? Are you truly going to end our relationship over a joke? It goes beyond the jest. I spoke aggressively. It's your perception of me. The way you have always seen me. Lisa, you don't respect me. You haven't. Furthermore, I refuse to live my entire life being viewed as inferior to you, simply because I'm not an office worker. Her face changed from incredulous to angry. Are you serious now? Are you even aware of your absurdity? Do you believe that your small company of repairing people's wiring makes you so unique? Guess what, though? It isn't that remarkable. Although her remarks were severe, they confirmed my choice. I offered her the engagement ring after removing it from my finger. I wish you success in locating someone you truly admire. I spoke strongly and calmly. She gazed at the ring as if it were about to burst in her grasp. She said, You're making a big mistake. Nobody else will tolerate your brittle ego. All I could say was, maybe not. But at least I'll be able to respect myself. After that, I left her standing out in the cold with the ring still in her hand and turned to go back inside the party to get my belongings. The noise of laughter and talking hit me like a wall as soon as I returned to the party to get my coat. There were still people in the room, but I could see them glancing at me. I was certain it would cause a stir. I honestly didn't give a damn. For the following 5 weeks, let them discuss it. Allow them to analyze each detail. I wanted Lisa and everyone there to remember this moment. She had been ripping me down all night. I reached for my coat, and now it was my chance to go on my terms. Behind me, I heard Lisa's heels click sharply. I was aware that she would not permit me to depart without a confrontation. Will you actually do this? She gave a hiss. She looked around anxiously to make sure nobody was listening, in the public eye. Slowly, I turned and met her gaze. I could sense all of her co-workers' interested looks. People's conversations were becoming quieter as they paid attention. You did this previously, Lisa, I said, remaining composed, but raising my voice loud enough for anybody in the vicinity to hear you cross the line and make fun of me in front of everyone. I'm simply going to go before things worsen. Her eyes narrowed into a scowl after briefly widening. She spat out, "Don't be so dramatic," and grabbed my arm so hard that my jacket wrinkled. She attempted to remain calm, but her nails sank into my sleeve. Nobody even took attention. You're exaggerating this situation. I released my arm and stepped back. Really? After your brief toast, I'm very certain that half the crowd wasn't laughing with you, so I spoke louder. You ensured that they were making fun of me. That was not the case. She yelled, raising her voice slightly to get more attention. Around us, the buzz of discussion slowed down. People were no longer even acting as though they weren't paying attention. She argued that it was humorous, which is why they were laughing. Anger caused her cheeks to flush. It is you who is making this a major issue. Stabilizing myself, I inhaled and let the stillness to linger for a while. Lisa, I spoke aggressively. I was made into a joke by you. Your lack of regard for me was made quite evident. Now when I'm unhappy, you're acting like I'm insane. Right now, can you even hear yourself? Her cheeks flushed, but not because she was embarrassed. This was unadulterated anger. She folded her arms. Everything I said is being misrepresented by you, she fired back. I wanted you to be included. You ought to express gratitude to me for including you in the discussion, rather than pouting like a kid. Thank you. I wasn't included. You made fun of me. You gave the impression that I was a simpleton who could just fix your lights. Lisa, I'm not included in it. That is discrediting me in order to boost your self-esteem. A voice interrupted Lisa before she could reply. Hello. How are things doing over here? I turned to see a woman in a sharp suit, one of her co-workers, holding, and seemed uneasy. Lisa turned to her and flashed the most phony grin I've ever seen. She responded hurriedly. Oh, it's okay. Just a little misunderstanding. She raised her voice by an octave. The woman looked from one of us to the other, obviously not persuaded. She gave me a pitying glance and then walked away, saying, Well, if you need anything. The moment Lisa's coworker turned away, her smile vanished. Can you see your actions? Her voice was dripping with hatred as she shouted, In front of my entire office, you're making me seem foolish. I couldn't contain my laughter. The room echoed with a sour sound. I shook my head and replied, I'm embarrassing you. You treated me like a joke the entire night, and now you're preoccupied with your appearance. It's really wealthy. I couldn't resist laughing, a scathing noise that broke the tension. I feel ashamed. You. Shaking my head, I said, You treated me like a joke the entire night, and now you're preoccupied with your appearance. Incredibly so. I caught a glimpse of a tall man standing close to the door, observing us. He had a familiar appearance. Then I saw it was Lisa's supervisor. Although he remained silent, it was obvious that he was listening, because of the way he crossed his arms and leaned slightly forward. Lisa also saw him. Her entire manner changed, and her face went pale. Could we simply discuss this at a later time? Her voice grew quieter all of a sudden. You're creating a commotion. I thought it was precisely what I wanted, so I shook my head. No, Lisa, this will not be done later. Right now, we're doing it. I refuse to live my entire life with someone who believes they are superior to me. Simply because I'm not an office worker, I'm worthy of better, more than you. Lisa's gaze shifted between her employer, myself, and the increasing number of individuals feigning inattention. All right. Her voice sounded almost like venom as she spoke. Leave. But when you realize that no one else will tolerate your brittle ego, don't come to me in tears. I shook my head and couldn't help but smirk. I'm crying for you. I take it you're kidding? Finding someone who appreciates me won't be a problem for me. I didn't actually say it aloud. I didn't have to. As I stared at her, allowing her words to linger in the air, my expression and my silence spoke for themselves. I had no intention of becoming like her. Rather, I turned to go. I remarked, Good luck finding someone who will put up with you. People, have fun at the celebration. As I turned and headed for the door behind me, I said over my shoulder. Like ripples in a pond, I could hear the whispers moving around the room. As I went by, I heard people whispering, looking at each other, and catching bits of their discussions. Have you noticed that? Why on earth was it happening? I didn't glance back, even though I thought she was a bit much. I didn't have to. I was aware of the harm done. Lisa desired to command attention. She had it now. As the woman who was called out in front of everyone, not as the party's queen. Let them speak. I felt lighter than I have in years by the time I got to my car. It felt great to stand up for myself. Lisa was free to tell her narrative as she pleased, but I and everyone else who witnessed what transpired recognized the truth. Following the celebration, the days were chaotic. In a nutshell, Lisa continued to contact and text me. From, can we just talk about this, to full on. They varied. You're behaving like a kid and all the other extremes. None of them received a response from me. To be honest, I needed room. How could someone who I believed loved and respected me treat me like a joke? I had to find out what the devil had just occurred. Lisa, however, was not the kind to sit quietly. Oh no. On the third day, I began receiving messages from friends we had in common. It seems that she wasn't satisfied with simply blowing up my phone She had to ensure that everyone else was aware of her side of the tale. "You freaked out over nothing," she says. "She's making it sound like you stormed out because you're too sensitive to handle a joke," one of my pals wrote me. I received screenshots from Lisa's social media accounts from another person. It was right there in the open. Because some people can't handle a strong woman with a sense of humor, she avoided a bullet in this article. Her buddies were talking her up in the comments. "You're worthy of better. He sounds very insecure. Goodbye." Uneasy. I was annoyed every time I saw that term, which kept popping up. I wasn't insecure. I was worn out. I'm sick of being minimized. I'm sick of being viewed as insufficient. As I didn't belong in her idealized business environment. After a few days, I received a message that completely stopped me in my tracks. It came from a colleague of Lisa's, someone who had attended the party, but whom I hardly knew. "Hey," she said, "I just wanted to reach out and apologize for laughing at that toast. To be honest, I always felt Lisa spoke strangely about you. It's as if she was settling for you. It wasn't until the other night that I realized how horrible it was. That wasn't fair to you. That validated what I had begun to suspect. This was not an isolated incident. For a long time, Lisa had been demeaning me. Most likely from the start. I considered ourselves on an equal footing. Partners. I was simply the man with the tools, though, to her. Someone she could manipulate and make jokes about when she felt like it. I began mentally reliving our whole relationship, analyzing each strange moment. She told me, "He's not your typical corporate guy, but he's great with his hands," when she first presented me to her parents. Or when she confided in her pals. "Yes, he has a business, but it's not as big or demanding as mine." How could I have missed it? How could I have missed the fact that Mom never took pride in me? Never shown me any real respect. A week or so later, the true icing on the cake arrived. Jen, Lisa's best friend, called me. I had always been cool with Jen. Although we weren't particularly close, we got along just fine. I assumed she could be calling to mediate a conflict or something when her name appeared on my phone. However, no. Jen said, "I just thought you should know. Lisa has been claiming that she chose you because she believed you would be simple to manage. You would feel too fortunate to have her," she added, "so she didn't think you'd ever leave her." Did she say that, really? Even though I knew the answer, I still asked. "Yes," Jen said. "At first I didn't want to believe it, but after the party I did. I apologize, dude. You're worthy of better." I thanked her, but to be honest, I wasn't sure how to react. Even though I was already over Lisa, hearing it was like a kick in the face. She was treating me like some charity case, and all the while, I felt like I was creating a life with someone who considered me as an equal. My life seemed to flip a switch after the dust cleared. I was done with Lisa. No more phone calls, texts, phony excuses, or attempts to change the facts. On my end, things were looking better. Since Lisa wasn't into rustic vacations, I decided to sell my engagement ring and use the proceeds to schedule a trip to the mountains, a destination I'd always wanted to see but never got around to since I immersed myself into my business and took on additional projects. It turns out that seeing the stars while sitting by a campfire is far more enjoyable than listening to others discuss brand synergy over little appetizers. I had plenty of time to consider what I wanted and didn't want throughout that trip. I came to the realization that I had allowed Lisa to determine my value based on her flimsy standards and had spent far too much time attempting to fit in. That was no longer the case. Then the final slice of karma arrived. A month or so following the celebration, rumor had it that her supervisor had taken notice of her antics at the party and her subsequent behavior. Evidently, the event moved up the ladder after several of her coworkers began discussing it. At work, she has been quite nervous. I was informed by one of her coworkers. She seems to be annoyed by the fact that others are discussing her behind her back. Last week, she even lost her temper with someone at a meeting, which is unusual for her. Lisa stated, "I worked my ass off to get where I am, and now it's like one stupid night is all anyone remembers," in a text message that another mutual acquaintance shared. It seemed to me that the understanding was beginning to set in. I wasn't just lost to her. People who used to respect her were suddenly doubting her judgment, which hurt her professional connections. Although I was not given all the information, I did hear that Lisa's self-representation did not sit well with the higher authorities. Let's just say she wasn't pleased about being passed up for a promotion she had been vying for. I'm not going to lie. Knowing that retribution had finally come up with her gave me a little sense of satisfaction. Her attitude, her need to undermine others in order to elevate herself, and the fact that it seemed like affirmation were the reasons I didn't want her to fail. It was more than simply a relationship issue. She was that person. I'm in a lot better position now, though. I'm happy that I broke things off before getting married and starting a family, and I feel like I made the correct choice every day. In an effort to share my knowledge and inspire others to pursue the trade, I have grown my company, improved my equipment, and even begun instructing aspiring electricians in an evening session. Has changed the game for me. In addition, I've gotten back in touch with people I lost touch with when I was with Lisa. In retrospect, I see how much of my existence revolved around her friends, hobbies, and aspirations. It feels amazing to be concentrating on what brings me joy right now. Since the split, I haven't heard directly from Lisa. She is still sharing her cryptic remarks and likely claiming to be the victim to anybody who would listen. But to be honest, I don't give a damn. To be honest, leaving that relationship was the finest decision I've ever made. It was more than the toast or the celebration. The realization that I should be with someone who appreciates me for who I am, not for how I fit into their story, was the key. One thing I've taken away from all of this is that relationships require respect. You shouldn't strive to stay with someone who doesn't respect you, and you can't love someone you don't respect. So, to anyone who is reading this and is experiencing a similar circumstance, have faith in your instincts. Let someone leave if they are bringing you down rather than up. Later, you'll thank yourself. I appreciate your patience with me over this whole ordeal. I feel like I'm finally back on track after a crazy journey, and you know who to contact if someone ever needs an outlet rewired. Story 4. As they are grieving over my stepdaughter, my entitled wife wants me to let her deadbeat ex-husband live with us. I was persuaded to concur by her relatives. I let her entire family to witness her cheating on me with him. Hi everyone. Prior to starting today's video, I need your assistance. One of the greatest ways you can help us out is to subscribe, since we've observed the channel is losing some of its popularity. It's simple, free, and helps us continue to provide you with amazing content. Your assistance is much appreciated. Together, let's continue to build this channel. Many thanks. Let's begin the video now. Reddit, hello. Before we go into this issue, let me give you some history. I didn't merely sign up for a wife when I married Melissa, a 35-year-old woman, at the age of 36. For a child who deserved better than the hand she had been handed, I signed up. Compared to Anna's biological parents, I was a better dad to her stepdaughter. Rick, Anna's father, was the type of man who believed that he was a decent parent if he showed up once a year with a cheap birthday present. For a weekend, he would act like the devoted father, then disappear for months at a time. Melissa did not fare much better. She lived with Anna, to be sure, but she was more concerned with maintaining her flawless Instagram profile than with being a mother. PTA gatherings? Not at all. Assisting with homework? Ignore it. She was even unable to recall Anna's instructors' names. I made a commitment to myself when I entered Anna's life. I would be the father she deserved. And I fulfilled my pledge. I attended all of the school plays, conferences, parent-teacher conferences, and soccer matches. When she was anxious about a big test, I gave her motivational speeches and stayed up late helping her with science projects. She wanted stylish dad braids like those her friends' moms wore, so I even learned how to do it. Our relationship went beyond the typical stepdad-stepdaughter interaction between Anna and me. She had a crush on a boy at school, but she trusted me more than she trusted anybody else. When she had her first period, Melissa was too preoccupied scrolling through her phone to notice that I was the one she turned to for help. It was me who hurried to the shop to get her supplies and check on her. I was more than a stepfather. Her safe haven was me, so I was devastated when Anna died. She was just 14. It was unjust and abrupt. Additionally, it left a hole in my heart that I doubt will ever completely close. I knew I had to be the strong one, though, even in my grief. Melissa was a complete mess. It makes sense. However, she checked out entirely. I'm responsible for Bill. Plans for the funeral. Me, once again. I'm relieving my family members. I loved Anna, so I didn't whine. And I believed that my love for Melissa was sufficient to bear the burden for us both. Melissa then made the most absurd suggestion I had ever heard in an attempt to gauge how much I could handle. A week or so had passed since Anna's funeral. Melissa gave me this depressing, pathetic look as we sat in the living room. I assumed she would mention how difficult the day had been, or how much she missed Anna. Rather, she struck me with this treasure. Rick ought to move in with us, in my opinion. I looked at her in anticipation of her giggling or claiming it was a joke. She didn't. "Do you want to move in with your ex-husband?" I inquired, to make sure I didn't get it wrong. "He is in mourning," she said, as if that clarified everything. "There is no one else for him. Additionally, I believe that he would benefit from being around people who are sympathetic to his situation." What I was hearing was unbelievable. "Melissa, Rick is a grown man. He can figure out his own life. Why is it our responsibility to take care of him?" She gave me this look like I was some heartless monster. "He's Anna's father," she said, as if that meant anything. I shut it down immediately. "No, absolutely not. He's not moving in here." That should have been the end of it. But then her family got involved. I don't know what Melissa told them, but suddenly I was getting calls and texts from her mom, her sister, even her dad. Her mom was the worst. "You need to think about what Anna would have wanted," she said, as if Anna would have been thrilled to have her deadbeat dad crashing in her house. Her sister wasn't much better. She sent me this long text about how Rick was part of the family and how I needed to put my pride aside for the sake of healing. Even her dad, who usually stayed out of this kind of stuff, called me up to say, "Look, I know it's not ideal, but Rick's going through a hard time. Maybe you could help him out for a little while." I wanted to scream. These people had no idea what they were asking of me. They weren't the ones who'd have to deal with Rick lounging around the house, eating my food and contributing. Absolutely nothing. They weren't the ones who would have to deal with the awkward tension of having their wife's ex-husband under the same roof, but they wouldn't let up. Melissa kept bringing it up, too, always with that same sad, guilt-trippy tone. "There is no one else for him," she'd say, like it was my fault he was a loser or it's just temporary. "You know, he's not asking for much. Not asking for much. He was asking for a free ride in a house I paid for under a roof. I maintained eating food I bought. If that's not asking for much, I don't know what is." After a week of this nonsense, I finally gave in. Not because I wanted to, but because I was tired of the constant nagging. "Fine," I said, "but there are rules. He stays in the guest room. He contributes to the house and he stays out of my way. Got it?" Melissa nodded, acting all grateful, but I could see the smug little smile she was trying to hide. She thought she'd won, and maybe she did for the moment. But deep down, I knew this wasn't going to end well. I just had to wait for them to screw up. And trust me, they would. So Rick moved in, and from the very first day, the guy made it clear he was going to be a problem. He showed up with 2 duffel bags and a cheap 6-pack of drinks, like he was crashing at a buddy's place for the weekend instead of moving into my house. I was already irritated, but I kept my cool. I told myself, let him settle in. Maybe he'll surprise you. The first thing he did was take over the guest room. Now, when I say guest room, I don't mean some luxury suite. It's a small room with a twin bed, a dresser, and a closet. Nothing fancy, but perfectly fine for someone who's supposed to be staying temporarily. Rick, however, treated it like a hotel within a day. His stuff was everywhere. Clothes on the floor, empty cans on the nightstand, and some crusty old pillow he brought that smelled like it hadn't been washed in years. Melissa, of course, was all. "He's just settling in. Give him a break." All right. I gave him a break. But then the real nonsense started. First, he had no sense of boundaries. The dude acted like he owned the area. He'd go into the kitchen shirtless as I was preparing coffee, scratching his stomach like some comedy trash. He'd take over the living room to watch whatever filth he wanted, leaving his dirty socks on the couch and the food. Don't get me started on the cuisine. Don't get me. I'd come home looking forward to a supper, only to find that Rick had helped himself to everything in the fridge. Leftover lasagna, gone. The steak I was saving for the weekend. He cooked it for lunch. I even caught him drinking right out of the milk container when I called him out on it. He shrugged and replied, "I'll get more tomorrow." But he never did. Melissa, she hardly spoke. She would dismiss my complaints with justifications. He's still getting used to it. He just does it that way. Try not to be too rigid. I was going crazy in the meanwhile. However, Rick's freeloading wasn't the worst aspect. It was the intimacy between him and Melissa. I initially convinced myself that I was dreaming. Grief does strange things to people, don't you think? Perhaps their common suffering was what brought them together. However, it became more difficult to ignore the more I observed. They were watching a movie on the couch when I arrived home from work late one evening. There is nothing wrong with that. Melissa, however, was seated far too near, like a close thigh contact. When I entered, she sprung to her feet, seeming to be guilty. "Oh," she responded, "we were only observing something," as if that clarified anything. My gut was screaming, but I remained silent. There was a problem. From then, it became worse. Melissa began to spend more time with Rick, always coming up with reasons to be with him. "Oh, I simply wanted to see how he was doing." Anna was the topic of our conversation. He wanted assistance sorting through his belongings. I woke up at approximately 2 in the morning one night and discovered that Melissa wasn't in her bed. When I woke up to find her, I saw her and Rick sitting in the kitchen, laughing and whispering as if they were at a high school sleepover. They both froze like children caught sneaking cookies when they spotted me. "What's happening?" I asked, trying to sound cool despite my inward rage. Rick muttered an apology before creeping back to his room as Melissa stumbled something about simply chatting. Although I hadn't pushed it yet, I began to listen more intently after that. The warning signs continued to mount. For example, when I saw Melissa sitting on Rick's bed, assisting him with folding his clothes, or when she decided to keep Rick company while he was feeling low by skipping supper with me. I heard them conversing in the living room one day. Rick made a stupid joke that made Melissa laugh, and I overheard her remark, "You're so funny. I've forgotten your humor. I forgot." How long had she been remembering how amusing Rick used to be? To see how Melissa would respond if I even suggested that Rick could be staying too long, I began to test the waters by gently bringing him up in discussions. She would get protective. "No one is bothered by him. He is still in mourning. You're exaggerating the situation." A few weeks later, the last straw. Rick's shirt was among our clothing as I was searching the laundry room for something. Not just any shirt, though. He donned his filthy, discolored undershirt to unwind. Melissa seemed agitated when I brought it up to her. To conserve water, I simply put it in with our belongings. Conserve water. I looked at her as I said, "When did you start caring about conserving water?" She had nothing to say. She only said something and turned to go. I had no hard evidence, but I sensed something was wrong. I considered going straight to her, but I knew she would simply deceive me. "You're acting suspiciously. It's all in your head. You're going overboard." I had to defeat them in a way they couldn't resist if I wanted to succeed. Okay. I was tired of being kind by now. Rick was taking advantage of others. Melissa was behaving quite suspiciously. Furthermore, I had had enough of being portrayed as the villain in my own house. They had another thing coming if they believed they could bullshit me and get away with it. Without evidence, I wasn't going to take them on directly. No, I required something that was indisputable, something that would reveal them in a way that they couldn't avoid with words. I thought of the strategy at that point. I was drinking coffee one morning when I noticed Melissa and Rick whispering to one another across the kitchen table as if they were planning a covert operation. Her family had been constantly telling me that Rick was family and that we had to help him. All right, their own remarks would be used against them by me. I made the decision to host an unexpected family dinner, a large one. Melissa's sisters, parents, and cousins, whoever had ever attempted to blame me for Rick. I pretended to be doing something kind, as if I were the kind-hearted one. They all acted as though I wasn't. I called her mother first. "Hello? I have been contemplating. Laying it on thick," I said. "We've all been going through a difficult time, so I believe we ought to do something extra special for Melissa and Rick. You know, something to show them, like a surprise dinner. For them, we're all here." She devoured it. "Oh, that's a really good idea. It would mean so much to them, in my opinion." Her smile was so clear over the phone that I could almost hear it. Her mother offered to bring a casserole right away. The rest of the family was on board before I knew it. Everyone was complimenting me on my thoughtfulness and kindness in planning this. Trust me, they were going to get a front row seat to the truth, so I let them believe whatever they wanted. Making sure Melissa had no suspicions was crucial to the strategy. I informed her that if we went out for drinks after work, I might even stay at a friend's house because I would be working late that evening. Avoid waiting up, I said nonchalantly. She didn't question it at all. I was planning the entire thing in the meantime. Charina. I made sure that everyone arrived at the house at precisely 6 o'clock. It would have been shortly after Rick and Melissa had become accustomed to their routine of sitting around like a couple of jobless characters. I left for work as usual on the day of the dinner, but I ran errands to get ready instead of going to the office. At 5:45 p.m., I wasn't going to let these people leave me with a sink full of dishes, so I grabbed some drinks, some snacks, and some disposable plates. I waited for everyone to arrive after parking a few blocks from the house. The first people there were Melissa's parents, who pulled up with a cake and a huge casserole dish. Soon after, her sisters arrived, accompanied by a few cousins who brought drinks and side dishes. We had a full house by 6 p.m., and I was giddy with anticipation. "All right, everyone," I said, addressing the group. "We're going to head inside, set everything up, and then I'll go get Melissa. She has no idea, so act surprised when she comes down." They all nodded, smiling and whispering about how thoughtful this was. I unlocked the door, let them in, and we quietly started setting up in the dining room. Now here's where it gets good. After everything was in place, I motioned for Melissa's mom to come with me. "You should be the one to wake her up," I said. "It'll be a nice surprise." She agreed, of course, and followed me upstairs. I walked to the bedroom, opened the door without knocking, and boom, there they were. Melissa and Rick half-dressed, tangled up in the sheets of my bed. I don't think I'll ever forget the sound of Melissa's mom yelling, "What the hell is this?" As she stood frozen in the doorway of my bedroom. Her voice was loud enough to shake the whole house and probably half the neighborhood. It was the type of situation you'd see in a trashy reality program. Except this was my true life. Rick, the miserable excuse of a guy, was trying to pull on his pants like he'd just recalled how garments worked. Melissa, she just sat there, hugging the covers to her chest, her face pallid and blotchy. I'd never seen her look so guilty, and that's saying something considering Melissa is not exactly a stranger to dodgy conduct. However, this was another level. "Surprise supper," I remarked, leaning nonchalantly against the doorframe. "Thought you'd love the family support, considering everything you've been going through." The turmoil spread like wildfire. Melissa's mom turned to me, her countenance a mix of amazement and betrayal. "What is going on here?" "Oh, you know." I shrugged as I spoke. "Rick and Melissa are the only ones who are keeping each other warm during their grief. The rest of the family came upstairs at that point, which was really touching. Melissa's father first, followed by her sisters. Story 5. I never thought my life would be changed by a vintage scarf. However, that is precisely what took place at Second Chance Thrift Store last spring. I'm Bianca, and I probably spend too much time searching through racks of used clothing and hidden fashion gems. That Tuesday, however, was unique. Another hand simultaneously lunged for a bright orange package that I had just noticed peeking out from under a stack of scarves. "I apologize." A deep voice laughed as it spoke. "First, ladies." The sweetest brown eyes I had ever seen met me when I glanced up. He was a tall man with a camera around his neck and untidy dark hair. His artistic appearance never failed to make my heart skip a beat. "No, go ahead," I answered, attempting to sound composed despite my pounding heart. "I was simply wondering. In fact, I could use your viewpoint," he said, gently opening the package after taking it up. A flawless silk scarf with gold and blue swirls was inside. "I have little fashion knowledge, however. Tomorrow I'm having a picture session with a retro theme. Is this a unique situation?" I was too excited to disguise it. "It's a true error. The scarf I wore in the 1970s. Do you see the artist's signature and the hand-rolled edges? Most likely, it's worth at least $800. It costs $50, and his eyebrows jumped up. "How are you aware of all of this?" I smiled and confessed that I'm a bit of a fashion nerd. Designer items are visible from the other side of the room. "I'm Sonny Owen, Bianca." Shaking my hand, he said, "A fashion geek. Meat photography enthusiast. Would you want to talk more about vintage clothes with me over coffee? For this shot, I would really appreciate your assistance." That was the beginning. The coffee became supper. Dates replaced dinner. and I fell deeply in love with Sunny 4 months later. Before I met Rosalie, his sister, everything seemed ideal. I met her for the first time over a Friday supper at their parents' place. I had spent hours selecting the ideal ensemble, which consisted of a vintage wrap dress by Toledo von Furstenberg that I had purchased for $100. Despite the warmth and kindness of Sunny's parents, Brianna and Francis, Rosalie's grin fell short of her eyes. She sipped her wine and remarked, "Oh, how inventive of you to wear second-hand clothes." "Never could I. Where have they gone? Nobody knows." "Rosalie," Brianna stated in a somber tone. Rosalie only gave a shrug. Simply said, "You might want to get a new outfit if you plan to join the Owen family. We need to uphold certain norms." Sunny squeezed my hand beneath the table, and I felt my cheeks heat up. He claimed that Bianca truly have a remarkable aptitude for fashion. "She is assisting with the styling of my next magazine shoot." "Really?" Rosalie raised her well-proportioned eyebrows. "How fascinating. I recently got engaged to Paul Will, who works in a variety of businesses, of course. The wedding of the season is what we're organizing." Her tone made me nervous for some reason, but I attempt to ignore it. After all, she was Sunny's sister. I had to leave a positive impression. Later that evening, I saw Sunny staring at me with worry as he drove me home. "I apologize for Rosalie," he said. "Sometimes she can be a lot." I said, "It's okay, even though it wasn't. Most likely, she is only defending her family." Rosalie had been observing me all night, analyzing everything I said and did, but I kept that from him. I kept quiet about how she had surrounded me in the kitchen and interrogated me about my life, career, and future goals. And when I remarked that I wanted a small, straightforward wedding someday, I most definitely didn't tell him about her response. The way she grinned, as if I had just given her a weapon. At the time, I was unaware that this was only the beginning. Rosalie Owen was going to use my life as a chess game for herself. In retrospect, I wish I had anticipated it. People may have a history, much like antique things. Sometimes, underneath their gleaming facade, there is a concealed gloom. Family dinners and courteous forced grins filled the next weeks. Every encounter with Rosalie made me feel more alienated, despite my persistent hopes that things would improve. It was meant to be different tonight. A laid-back cookout at home to commemorate Sunny's most recent magazine cover. Wearing a vintage Chanel coat, I came early to assist Brianna in the kitchen. While chopping vegetables, I had meticulously rehabilitated myself. Brianna smiled warmly as she caressed the material of my jacket. "Bianca, you have such a gift," she remarked. "The way you breathe new life into these vintage antiques. You seem like a great fit for Sunny, and I hope you know Francis." Rosalie, dressed in what appeared to be the complete most recent collection, stormed into the room before I could reply, appearing as though she had just walked out of a Gucci advertisement. "Mother," she said sharply, "tonight Paul is bringing his parents. Do you recall the pricey wine I requested?" I mistook this for a simple family meal. I tried to speak in a light-hearted manner. Rosalie gave a chilly chuckle. "Oh, you didn't hear from Sunny. I made it into a celebration of my engagement. Paul's dad is thinking about utilizing Sunny's photos for their upcoming advertising campaign." She extended her hand and caressed my blazer's sleeve. Her chuckle was as cold as her smile. "Is this used? What courage you have." My jaw tightened, but Sunny entered and put his arms around me from behind before I could respond. "Hello, lovely. You look fantastic wearing that jacket." Rosalie said it should. She spoke in a sarcastic tone. "The price of the genuine item is about $20,000. She looked at her mom. "We must prepare the formal dining area. As opposed to dining out, it's not like the BBQ kind of wills." Brianna's face fell as I saw it. She had been cooking Sunny's favorite grilled foods all day. "Don't you think nobody realizes how crucial this is for the family?" Rosalie spoke softly, but her piercing gaze was fixed on Sunny. "We might be able to accomplish both." Sunny made the offer. Even though he kept some food on the grill, his tone was doubtful. As Brianna gently began bringing the dishes inside, I felt my heart drop. Rosalie had once again taken over what should have been Sunny's celebration, the same way she appeared to be handling every other aspect of our life. During dinner, I found myself seated between Rosalie, who didn't miss an opportunity to boast about the upscale designer stores she was choosing for her wedding gown, and Paul's mother, who kept inquiring as to whether my jacket was some kind of costume. Bianca undoubtedly has some original wedding-related ideas, Rosalie stated abruptly, as she turned to face me and pretended to smile. What were you contemplating? Something old-fashioned, I suppose. There was silence at the table. I hadn't even discussed marriage with Sunny yet. As everyone waited for me to respond, I could feel the heat rising on my face. Actually, I haven't. Oh, yes, exactly. Rosalie interrupted me. You haven't even gotten engaged or set a date yet. She touched my hand as she reached over. Do not be concerned. I'll assist you organize everything when it occurs. After I get married, I'll have a ton of experience. Francis, obviously uncomfortable, cleared his throat. Rosalie. Tonight, maybe, we should concentrate on rejoicing in Sunny's accomplishment. Naturally, Daddy. Rosalie smiled and held out her glass. To Sunny's family and success. Later, while the visitors were departing. In the corridor, I heard Rosalie conversing with Paul. Poor thing, she remarked in a stern, low voice. She tries so hard to fit in. However, you can't purchase a class, can you? I mean, showing up in second-hand clothing to meet your folks. She appeared decent enough. Paul answered, his tone pleasant, and the blazer was actually pretty classy. Oh, honey, you're too nice, Rosalie remarked with a little chuckle. She's not her own stuff, though. I assure you, soon enough, Sunny will discover it out. I slipped away before they could see me, and my gut wrenched. As I collected my belongings in the kitchen, my hands were shaking. Without glancing up, I discovered Francis at the sink, calmly doing the dishes. Softly, he said. Avoid letting her affect you. Cruelty is sometimes confused with elegance. As I waited for Sunny to bring me home, I nodded and passed the knot in my throat, unable to speak. I noticed my image in the window. My cherished vintage blazer didn't feel like a statement for the first time. It had the feel of a costume. I began to question if loving Sunny was worth the sacrifice of becoming accepted in his society. I was unaware at the time that Rosalie was far from done. I would have to decide between defending myself and maintaining the peace when she made her next move. It was at the family's lake house that everything changed. The previous evening, under a breathtaking sunset that seemed unreal, Sunny had proposed. I should have realized Rosalie wouldn't allow me to experience joy for even a single day. I discovered I had left my engagement ring upstairs while I was assisting Brianna in the kitchen. Once I've cleaned my hands. To get it, I went to Sunny's former bedroom. But through the slightly open door, I could hear Rosalie's voice as I approached. The time is ideal. Now I can use all of Bianca's wedding ideas for my own, she said. She won't suspect. For months, I've been gathering them. My hand was hanging above the doorway when I froze. Do you really think that's required? Paul answered in a cautious tone. Your brother recently became engaged. Oh, please. Rosalie laughed dismissively as she said, their wedding is going to be some strange vintage occasion. I'm doing everyone a favor by turning her ideas into something actually sophisticated. Besides, Sunny's told me everything. Her dress design, the venue she wants, even the antique lace she found for the veil. My stomach turned over. I had shared those private times with Sunny. I'm dreaming of our shared future. He had assured me that they would remain private. Rosalie went on to say, I've already called her ideal location and reserved it for the weekend before their date. This morning, the deposit was cleared. Doesn't that sound a bit self-evident? Paul sounded uneasy as he asked. Rosalie smirked and remarked, That's the best part. Sheila, if she accuses me of mimicking her, I'm crazy. Everyone will believe that she is attempting to steal my ideas. The discussion abruptly ended, so I must have made a sound. My heart is racing. I turned and hurried back downstairs, gripping the railing tightly to steady myself. In the kitchen, Sunny was helping his mom toss a salad. When he spotted me, he grinned, but as soon as he saw the expression on my face, his smile vanished. Hello. What's the matter? He asked, concern in his voice. Can we have a conversation? I remarked, my voice trembling despite my effort to sound cool. The lake mocked me with its serene beauty as it glittered in the brilliant July light outside on the balcony. I tried to control the raging feelings that were rising within of me as I turned to Sunny. Have you been discussing our wedding plans with Rosalie? With a tense voice, I asked. Yeah, he said, his expression bewildered. Recently, she has shown a great deal of curiosity. She expressed her desire to assist. Isn't that advantageous? I let out my aggravation by shaking my head. She's aiming to steal everything, Sonny. She was speaking to Paul, and I just heard it. My voice shook with rage as I spoke. She's already booked our wedding venue, the one I privately showed you. Sonny's expression fluctuated between astonishment, skepticism, and defensiveness. Come on, he said. That's got to be a misunderstanding. Rosalie refused. Wouldn't it? I intentionally tried to hurt myself by snapping. Since I've known her, she has only done that. Before I could stop them, the words poured out. I wanted to scream when he remarked, "You're overreacting," in a cool, contemptuous tone. She's Bianca, my sister. At the moment, she is just thrilled about weddings. Rosalie came in the doorway before I could reply, wearing a phony look of worry that made my skin crawl. Is everything all right out here? She asked sweetly. I believed I heard voices being raised. Have you reserved Fredericksburg's Spring Arbor for your wedding? Asked her outright. Oh, that, she said, grinning broadly. Indeed. Isn't it ideal? You mentioned it at dinner last month, and I recalled how much you enjoyed it. I hope it's okay with you. I mean, great minds do think alike. I looked at Sonny, hoping he would say something to support me. Uncomfortably, he moved away from my gaze. Maybe we could all just... He started. What exactly? I took off my engagement ring and interrupted, my voice trembling. Act as though this isn't taking place. Just let her steal every part of our wedding like she's been planning for months. Bianca. Stop being dramatic, Rosalie advised. Fake worry was evident in her voice. Simply state that you are not prepared to organize a wedding. I put the ring on the railing of the deck. Tears clouded my view. You're correct. My voice broke as I said, I'm not prepared, not for this family, not for a spouse who refuses to defend me, and most certainly not for a sister-in-law who looks at my life as if it were her own catalog. As I turned to go, I heard Sonny shout my name, but it was Rosalie's voice that followed me, chilly and arrogant. See? I warned you she wasn't own material. I got in my car and drove away, not knowing where I was heading. What I didn't comprehend then was that this wasn't the end. It was the beginnings of something new, something I hadn't seen coming. 5 days later, when I was at work sifting through old clothing, Francis Owen stepped into my boutique. He seemed absolutely out of place, his pricey outfit a strong contrast to the weathered hardwood floors and racks of second-used items. This is an interesting place, he added, tracing a 1960s Dior outfit with his finger. Brianna said, You fix these? Unable to say, I nodded. Was Francis present to persuade me to return and protect Rosalie? His tone wasn't harsh, but he admitted that Sonny had been miserable. But I doubt it was just due to the loss of you. What are you saying? Quietly, I asked. He clarified that the Wills had canceled their advertising effort. It seems that Paul was apprehensive about collaborating with our family. He turned an antique brooch over in his palm after removing it from the display case. Are you being blamed by Rosalie? Naturally. I was repairing a garment when my hands froze. Paul and I haven't spoken, no. Paul, however, is neither dumb nor blind. Francis carefully placed the brooch down. He stopped by the home yesterday to inquire about Rosalie's recent interest in unusual locations and antique weddings. The door of the shop chimed before I could answer. Sonny entered but halted upon seeing his father. Why have you come here, Dad? Simply walking away. Francis squeezed my shoulder as he went by and murmured, Actually. Bianca, do you recall what I said about authenticity? No matter how hard people try, some things are impossible to replicate. Sonny and I stood there in awkward quiet after he went. His normally tidy hair was disheveled, as if he had been raking his hands through it, and he appeared worn out. Finally, he remarked, You left your ring behind. You abandoned me to deal with my sister on my own. I gave a head shake, looking at the ripped edges of a ruined silk scarf. She has been methodically attempting to destroy everything positive in my life. Additionally, you've been permitting her to assist her. He seemed defensive as he continued. She's my sister. Additionally, I was meant to be your wife. My voice cracked on the final syllable, but when she started stealing our wedding plans, you couldn't even tell her to stop. With a groan, he combed his hair once again. He was visibly agitated, but I didn't believe he trailed off. I have something for you to see. He gave me his phone after taking it out. It was a sequence of texts from Rosalie. As I read them, I felt sick to my stomach, since they included in-depth inquiries about my wedding plans, allusions to confidential discussions that Sunny and I had had, and even pictures of my designs that she had requested him to photograph. Sunny explained that she was simply thrilled about the wedding preparations, as if it clarified everything. She desired to assist. I gazed at him, the understanding striking me like a frigid wave. He honestly didn't see what was occurring, or worse, he didn't want to. Paul, according to your father, canceled the advertising effort, I said in a forceful but calm voice. My voice was scarcely steady as I whispered gently, "Have you ever wondered why?" Confusion clouded Sunny's face. "You must have said something to Paul," Rosalie said. She did, of course. I laughed bitterly as I spoke. "And you thought she was real, like you usually do." Paul was there as the shop door chimed once again. He was uneasy, yet resolute. "I apologize for interrupting." He looked from one of us to the other. "Could we discuss Rosalie, Bianca?" Sunny moved in front of us right away. "It's not true what she told you about my sister. I haven't heard anything from her." Paul's tone was forceful. "I am here for that reason. I need to know if putting my confidence in Rosalie is a mistake." I didn't miss the irony. As her own brother stood there supporting her falsehoods, Rosalie's fiancé came to me seeking the truth. I turned to face Sunny, offering him one final opportunity. "Would you like to share the texts with him, in reference to your sister's plot to rob my wedding?" Individually, Sunny remained silent. He could have spoken, but his silence was more powerful. I inhaled deeply while fighting back tears. "I believe you ought to go." With a broken voice, I told him, "You two, Rosalie's actions or inactions are no longer my concern." Paul asked Sunny, "Did you really not see what she was doing to Bianca's?" as they were leaving. Sunny didn't respond, but I didn't have to listen. I already knew all I needed to know about his loyalty from his silence. I had no idea that Paul's visit would start a series of events that would alter everything for the entire family, not just Sunny and myself. I was invited to Rosalie's wedding 2 weeks later. This was no ordinary invitation. It was a perfect duplicate of the unique design I had only ever shown Sunny and had doodled in my secret diary. As I read the date, my hands began to shake. I was still looking at the invitation 3 weeks prior to my wedding day when Brianna phoned. She spoke in a strained tone. "This is awkward," she started. "Rosalie, however, demands that you attend. It would mean a lot to her," she adds. "It certainly would." Tracing the intricate artwork I had spent months creating, I said, "Did she disclose the source of the invitation to you?" "Create." A lengthy pause ensued. "Please, Bianca." Brianna spoke quietly. She stole my wedding in an attempt to make apologies. Even I was astonished by the vitriol in my voice. In fact, Brianna paused. "I'm phoning in part for that reason. Rosalie requests your assistance with her clothing. She claims that the change she requires would be ideal for your antique knowledge." It nearly made me chuckle. "Which dress?" "The one she discovered in that tiny London shop." Brianna spoke quietly. "Dior, in the 1960s. You spoke about loving." I felt sick to my stomach. During a late-night talk with Sunny, I had mentioned the dress and how I had a dream about making it for our wedding. Rosalie has now managed to locate the original. "No," I answered firmly. "Please, Bianca," Brianna begged. Her voice broke. "The family is rather tense right now. Sunny seldom ever hears from Francis. Rosalie isn't herself, and Paul is doubting everything. Perhaps if you assisted, if you had been nice to her." "Goodness?" I broke off, my voice rising like the compassion Sunny exhibited by helping her steal every single aspect of my wedding, or the kindness she gave me when she took every single element of my wedding. The shop door chimed before Brianna had a chance to answer. With a proud smile and a garment bag in hand, Rosalie entered. "I'll give you a call back." Before Brianna could say anything more, I hurriedly said, and hung up. Unexpected. As she placed the bag on my counter, Rosalie sung, "With this, I need your magic touch. You are the only one I trust, and it's a little sensitive." She opened the suitcase and pulled out the outfit I had always wanted to wear. The white silk was just as beautiful as I had thought it would be. "How did you discover it?" My voice was empty as I asked. "Oh, you loved it so much," Sunny said. "Casually," she said. Her grin is poisonously sweet. "I knew my people. Find it." My arm was touched by her. "Think of this as my olive branch. Maybe we can get past all of this unpleasantness if you help me with the changes." For the first time, I could see everything clearly as I gazed at her. There was no wedding involved. Control was at issue here, about shattering me into pieces. "No." Silently, I said, "I'm sorry." Her voice was stern as she inquired. "No," I said. I pushed the clothing bag back to her after zipping it shut. "Leave my shop and take your dress." She stopped smiling. "You're acting absurdly. We're discussing my wedding here." "No," my voice said. Steady. My wedding was meant to take place here. My fantasies, my dresses, and my ideas. You couldn't tolerate that, though, could you? To prove you could, you had to take everything. None of it is fair to you. The mask slipped, and her face contorted. "You're just a chick from a thrift store who got fortunate with my brother. By revealing your true self to him, I'm doing him a service. And who are you?" "Rosalie's." I stepped around the desk and asked, my rage giving me power. In addition to stealing the aspirations of others. Her cheeks reddened with anger. She snatched up the garment bag. "I'll be done, and you'll regret this. There won't be anything left for you. Nor your reputation, nor your designs. Not my brother, of course." She slammed the door behind her as she ran out. Paul was standing just outside the storefront window when I saw him, his face glowering with rage. He had heard it all. Knowing that Rosalie had finally revealed her true nature to her fiancé should have made me happy. However, I felt empty instead. Even worse than anything she had done so far, I knew what was about to happen. Rosalie Owen no longer only wanted my nuptials. She desired to totally ruin me, and I was at a loss on how to stop her. Something drew me to Rosalie's wedding, even though I shouldn't have. Perhaps the same inquisitiveness that causes individuals to slow down and observe auto accidents. As soon as the ceremony started, I crept into the church. I remained hidden in the back, out of sight of everyone. It was all mine. The hand-pressed flower arrangements, the old lace that was stretched down the seats, and even the precise white color. I had been looking for months, but Rosalie wearing the outfit of my dreams. That was the knife's last twist. Isn't it a lovely ceremony? Francis Owen was standing next to me when I jumped, startled. Calm but inscrutable was his look. "She took everything." My voice trembled with every single detail as I murmured, "I understand," he muttered. He gave his phone to me. My wedding planning notebook, with each page captured on camera and preserved, was displayed on the screen. "She received these from Sunny months ago," he clarified. "They were all looking at the family's cloud storage when I found them." My stomach rumbled. He gave it all to her. He believed he was being helpful. "Francis still doesn't understand what she's actually doing," and his voice sounded worn out. The wedding march sounded. I recognized it and froze. I had found the perfect antique recording in an old record store. With my grin and my fantasies all around me, I saw Rosalie go down the aisle while floating in my dress. Paul's face was taut and inscrutable as he stood at the altar. For a few seconds. When our gazes locked, I noticed something in his face. Perhaps an apology. The ceremony started when Rosalie arrived at him. I should have walked away at that moment, but instead, I remained where I was and watched the priest pose the question. "Is there anyone who objects?" The quiet was oppressive, nearly oppressive. Paul cleared his throat after that. "Yes, I do," silently, he said. "I protest." Whispers broke out in the chapel. Rosalie's complexion turned pallid. She stumbled, her voice wavering. "Paul, what are you doing?" His voice was forceful as he turned to face her. "Someone who bases their pleasure on the suffering of others is not someone I can marry." His remarks broke the atmosphere as he turned to face the visitors. This wedding was robbed in every way. Even the music, the decorations, and the outfit. Everything was taken verbatim from Bianca's blueprints. Plans Rosalie stole without authorization. That is absurd. Rosalie's tone became defensive and piercing. Sonny, inform them. Sonny was completely perplexed as he got up from his front row seat. Trapped between the truth and his sister, Sonny remarked in a tremulous voice. I just shared some ideas with you. You expressed a desire to assist me. Does it help? Paul chuckled bitterly. You mean to ruin your brother's relationship and take away every aspect of his wedding? If you handed them to me, it wouldn't be theft. When her mask finally came off, Rosalie yelled. Her tone became icy. I did her a favor anyhow. She is not deserving of her own family wedding. She is nothing more than a girl who works at a second-hand store and has more style than you could ever possess. Francis cut in, his voice echoing above the astonished visitors. And who just revealed your true identity to everyone in this room. The resulting hush was deafening. I glanced around at the shocked expressions of the visitors. Paul stood quietly dignified. It appeared as though Sonny was beginning to realize the harm that had been done, but I was halted by Rosalie's look. Hatred, pure and unadulterated, directed at me. You. She pointed at me with a growl. You have this planned. Everyone turned against me because of you. She did not lunge at me. Instead, she snatched the old lace runner from the closest pew and gave it a forceful yank. In a matter of seconds, candles and flowers fell to the ground, breaking and flying everywhere. Everything she had stolen was being destroyed as she tore through the decorations. Rosalie pauses. She pushed him away as Sonny yelled and reached for her arm. You are to blame for this, she yelled at me. I lost everything because of you. Respect from my family, my brother, and my fiancé. I'll see to it that you never possess anything. Security had to drag her away at last. The embarrassment and remorse on Sonny's face should have felt like a win when I managed to get his attention. Rather, it simply left me feeling empty. I snuck away unseen as the mayhem whirled around me, but I heard Rosalie's last cry as I got to the door. Bianca, this isn't over. I'll hold you accountable. Her comments replayed in my head as I walked home in the last of the light. One thing she was correct about. It had not ended. I now had to choose whether the danger of ruining what little of my own family remained was worth it in order to protect myself. I wasn't sure I could live with either option, to be honest. Rosalie was waiting outside when I opened the store the next morning. She looked practically regular in jeans and a simple sweater, instead of her typical fancy attire. We must have a conversation, she murmured softly. I let her in after unlocking the door. It seemed as though the store was holding its breath for the impending event. I lost everything yesterday, Rosalie said, as she ran her fingertips over an old clothing rack. I can't get Paul to answer my phone. Mother is unable to even look at Sonny and me. Her voice cracked, but she bounced back fast. None of it was forced upon you by me. I spoke aggressively. I held the counter between us and spoke steadily while keeping a tight eye on her. You decided to pilfer my wedding arrangements. You stole my brother away from me, so you decided to lie. Rosalie, her serene exterior is crumbling. All I had was him. Then you just entered with your genuineness, artistic ability, and flawless vintage elegance. The word came out of her mouth like poison. Sonny made decisions on his own. I spoke aggressively. Did he? She took out her phone with a grimace, as he's now outside, all set to make another decision. As Sonny approached with a guilty expression on his face and appeared to be stuck between the two of us, my heart fell. Rosalie insisted that she be told, inform her of your choice. Sonny ducked from my eyes. Bianca must be healed by her family. We must put this behind us. Perhaps if you expressed regret to Rosalie? I apologized. The phrase that turned Paul against her was like glass shards in my throat. He persisted in making fun of her at the wedding. I felt the last glimmer of hope I had left for him as I looked at him. Break down. You still don't understand? Silently I said, Sonny. She did more than simply pilfer my wedding preparations. She attempted to take over my life. You also assisted her in doing so. I didn't mean to say no. I interrupted him. You were never important. That's the issue. I looked across at Rosalie. Do you want an apology? All right. I apologize for ever seeing myself as a member of this family. I regret spending months in love with someone who was blind to what was in front of him. That is insufficient. Rosalie's voice trembled as she snapped. My life was ruined by you. I will now ruin your company. I've already informed all of the city's suppliers that you sell knockoffs as genuine vintage over the phone. In fact, a fresh voice cut in. You're not going to do that. Paul held a folder as he stood at the doorway. Rosalie, I captured it all. Every danger. All lies. Every effort to damage Bianca's standing. I believe that this pattern of harassment would be of great interest to the police. Rosalie's complexion became white. Wouldn't you give me a try? Paul spoke in a tone as icy as iron. Bianca is the only reason I haven't turned this over already. To give you a chance to go, she requested me to wait. Sonny spoke softly as he turned to face me. Is that accurate? I gave a nod. Sonny, I didn't want to ruin your family. I only wanted to keep myself safe, Bianca. I retreated as he grabbed for my hand. We're done now. Every one of us. I spoke firmly as I glanced at Rosalie. Go make up whatever tale you need to justify your failed wedding with your brother. I no longer give a damn. She continued. You're making a mistake. But her tone faltered. Thinking was the only error. Any of this was necessary to me. I pulled the door open. Rosalie, goodbye. Sonny, goodbye. Silently they departed. Sonny glanced over his shoulder one final time in desperation. Paul remained, observing me intently. You could have ruined them, he said. Why didn't you? It all began with an antique silk scarf, which I picked up. Therefore I don't wish to emulate her, I said quietly. Some things are more valuable than retaliation. Now what are you going to do? Paul inquired. Feeling lighter than I have in months, I grinned. Finding lovely items that people discard and giving them new life is what I've always done. Perhaps, however, no longer for the own family. I turned the business sign to open as Paul walked out. As life progressed, so did I. Surrounded by the antiques that I had lovingly repaired, I came to a significant realization. The most precious items we discover aren't always what we were searching for. They are the aspects of ourselves that we learn about in the process, and nobody could take that away from me, not even Rosalie's. I stood in my new studio 5 months after Rosalie's disastrous wedding. There was a subtle whisper of old leather and silk, and the room seemed alive. Bright light streamed in through the big windows, fixing brass fittings that I had saved from a former department store. Like me, everything in the room had a backstory. When the bell above the door rang, Brianna Owen entered, seeming poised yet apprehensive. Touching a refurbished Chanel garment, she remarked, "This is gorgeous, Bianca. Francis said that you had done something unique with the location, but this is really amazing." "Thank you." To keep my hands occupied, I made adjustments to a display. "I doubted you would show up," Francis demanded. "He wants to discuss making an investment in your company." Her voice was quiet as she paused. "Last week, Rosalie departed for London. Not surprised, I nodded. Sonny's too. He is accepting tasks abroad, I believe. I believe he has now realized what he has lost. Everyone does." Before I could answer, there was Paul in the doorway. He had turned into an unexpected ally since the wedding, using his business connections to help me find unique antique items. "Are you prepared for the meeting?" After asking, he looked at Brianna. "Mrs. Owen, the time was ideal. Did you mention the investment opportunity to her?" I had just reached that point. After taking out an envelope, Brianna gave it to me. "Francis and I would want to assist you in developing your repair skills, your sense of aesthetics. One store shouldn't be the only one. There was a business proposition in the mail. Financing for the establishment of a chain of upscale antique repair shops, under my direction as creative director. It was the sort of chance one had hoped to have with Sonny. Slowly, I responded, "I don't know. I don't exactly have the finest record when it comes to partnerships with my own family." Francis stated as he entered the room. "That's precisely why it should be you. Someone who prioritized honesty over acceptance, someone who demonstrated our current state, and Rosalie. Sunny? I inquired. Frances stated resolutely that they will learn to cope with it, similar to how they're learning to accept their decisions. Paul lightly stroked my arm. You don't have to make a decision right now, but don't allow the outcome deter you from creating something truly remarkable. I surveyed my workshop, admiring the items I had saved and the sketches I had recovered for entirely original concepts. Then I noticed something I had seen before. A package on the counter, bright orange. What is this? I inquired. At an estate auction I discovered it. Paul grinned as he spoke. You might want it back, I thought. The air was within, Ms. The scar from the first sunny day, but I experienced something else in place of agony. Finalization. All right, I turned to face Brianna and Frances. However, I have health issues. My vision will be this. My creations. No concessions. There is no other way we would want it. Frances gave a kind response. After they departed, I watched the sunset convert the city into hues of gold while standing in the doorway of my studio. An unknown number texted me, making my phone vibrate. I apologize for all of this. I also didn't answer. Vintage items, for example, are best left in their boxes to serve as reminders of our former selves. Rather, I strolled over to my desk, where a ruined evening gown from the 1950s was lying in need of repair. The beading was strewn around. I could see its potential, just as I had finally recognized mine, even though it seemed torn. A young woman entered when the door's bell rung above. She was just as nervous as I was. This was discovered in a second-hand shop. She pointed to a shabby designer purse. It's not worth mending, according to everyone. However, you notice something about it. Seeing the hope in her eyes, I concluded for her. I led her to my workbench, grabbed my tools, and got to work, saying, "Let me show you what it could become." I came to a realization. Not all of the old items we uncover are the most precious items we restore. These are the aspects of ourselves that we believed were irreparably damaged. And sometimes, with every stitch, letting go of an old desire creates space for something even better to come. I started writing my own narrative, one moment